Hello, please let me see your ticket stubs for the double-edged double bill. This week, we have a wet hot American summer at Sleepaway Camp. Each week, Adam Thomas and Thomas Mariani will come to the table to discuss the randomly selected yin and yang of a double feature. Then, both will have to pick a number between 1 and 10 in order to seal their fates for the next episode. One will have two good movies, the other two bad ones. Let the chaos begin. I am Adam Thomas, and eat shit and live.
And I'm Thomas Mariani, and you smell like burger. I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. I do, generally.
I do, and I get it. But yes, welcome everybody to Double Edged Double Bill, where every week we talk about a good and a bad movie related to a topic. And this week, it's late June. We're in the middle of the summer, so we figured it'd be fun to do an episode all about summer camp adjacent films. But we had our patrons vote between two particular choices of summer camp horror movies, and then the ultimate winner, which is summer camp comedies. Though it's interesting, Adam, when we ended up getting this as a particular topic, it was a bit hard to kind of navigate in terms of like both good and especially bad that we wanted to actually cover for the show.
Oh yeah, bad is abysmal to try to find one that's worth talking about. Let's put it that way. There's a plenty
Right.
out there,
Yeah.
but are any of them even worth it? Like, a big one that a lot of people bring up is like Daddy Day Camp. A lot of reasons to not talk about that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Mainly, Cuba Gooding Jr., and also it's terrible. And it's just boring. There's nothing to talk about. It's just a formulaic piece of shit movie.
Right, and it's a trouble with especially comedies, obviously, because when we've talked about it many times, a bad comedy is the worst kind of movie to like really watch or talk about, because it's just like, it wasn't fucking funny. I didn't laugh that much.
Listen to us talk about movie 43, and you'll get what we're saying.
Well, even though we talked a lot about it in terms of just describing it in
Yeah.
extreme detail, that's the only way we could really talk about it. But yeah, with the summer camp comedy genre, it's also interesting because like that was a genre that like there'd been summer camp related comedies in like earlier than like the 70s or 80s with stuff like The Parent Trap, the original stuff like that. But it really boomed with after like Meatballs. Meatballs was like the first big like part of that like big wave of like 80s comedies, and there were so many Meatballs ripoffs and even sequels to Meatballs that were just trying to emulate that. Like, oh, it's a wild ride at camp, and that is a genre that has obviously a lot of issues to it in terms of sometimes that shit doesn't age particularly well.
I.e., all of Meatballs.
Yeah, we might talk about Meatballs a bit later. Put a pin in that. But well, you kind of came up with the idea of like doing the split between horror and comedy. How do you feel about summer camp comedies in general, though, Adam?
It's not necessarily like a genre I'm super beholden to, but it is definitely an identifiable genre, subgenre. I grew up in the era where they were getting pretty big, things like that. So it's kind of something I've always remembered. I never went to camp as a kid, but I was always like, oh man, if I did, I can't think of the hijinks that I'd be able to get into and stuff like that. Like, I think it's definitely a subgenre that's earned its place, but ran its course.
I was vaguely aware of all this stuff, and I did actually go to summer camp a couple times in my youth, mostly though church camps, so it wasn't as at least overtly salacious. There were plenty of times where like I was like the goody good kid, so if people were like off doing other stuff, just like, oh, I don't know, guys, I don't know if we should do that. But at the same time, like there were still fun elements to it. Like I remember in one of the ones that from my youth, Heavyweights. Had the whole thing with like the blob, which was like the big like inflated thing that you would jump into like the river with. We had that at our church camp, and there were certain other things like that that made it like a fun time. Even though those also like those experiences kind of made me realize like I'm not an outdoors kid. Shockingly, from a guy who records a podcast, not a kid that went outdoors a lot, and those experiences were just like, yeah, fuck mosquitoes and bugs and fucking going outdoors and skinning my knees and bullshit like that. Not a big fan of it, but in a summer camp comedy setting that can be really enjoyable and endearing in the right hands, though those hands aren't often at the wheel of movies like that.
The thing about them is I'm sure we'll talk about, and I argue one of our movies really parodies it in a way. They tend to just be really like sex romp comedies in a way, and when you think about the subject material, I mean, it's kids. It's always just kind of gross.
Yeah, it's either like teenage counselors or they're around children. So how often that like kind of is weird to the point where, like you mentioned, our good pick is more of a parody of those kind of movies, and our bad pick is technically more of like the other option that the patrons didn't end up voting for ultimately of horror as summer camp, though it yields a lot of unintentionally comedic gold, as we'll talk about, because we did our picking at the end of last week, and we end up with your good pick of Wet Hot American Summer, and we end up with my bad pick of Sleepaway Camp, which we'll have so much to talk about with both of those. But let's start off with Wet Hot American Summer.
This summer, take a trip back to 1981 with the special people who made summer camp unforgettable. The camp director.
4 campers are stuck in the ropes course. I meant to tell you about that yesterday. Could you get to it now?
The counselors.
Wait for me, Abby Bernstein.
Wait. That's one take off my shirt.
The kitchen staff.
Finish up the taters. I'm gonna go fondle my sweaters. Come on, what? You said you were gonna go fondle your sweaters. No, I didn't.
And of course, who can forget the sex, the muggings, the cover-ups, the malaria, and the friendships that last a lifetime. Janine Garofalo, David Hyde Pierce, Paul Rudd, Christopher Maloney, and Molly Shannon. Wet, Hot American Summer.
So Wet Hot American Summer came out July 27th, 2001, from director David Wayne, who co-wrote with Michael Showalter, who was one of many people in this cast. And it's interesting because those two were part of originally the MTV sketch comedy show The State, which is so fascinating in terms of just like a big starting off point for a bunch of big comedic talents, where it's like a lot of the people that would later go on to do like Stella, like him, Michael Showalter, Michael Ian Black are part of the cast, but also a lot of the Reno 911 people started off on that show. And a lot of comedic talents kind of came to them, were fans of them, to the degree that this cast is astonishing by modern terms. Like, we've got Janine Garofalo, David Hyde Pierce, Molly Shannon, so people who are more established, but then a young Paul Rudd, Bradley Cooper, before he was ever around for Oscars.
Amy Poehler.
Elizabeth Banks, Joe Latruglio.
Christopher Maloney. I mean, the cast it's kind of an insane cast. It truly is. And I think because of that cast is the movie you end up with.
Yes, because if you're unaware, this is basically like, as you mentioned, a parody of a lot of those kind of like summer camp comedy movies, where it's about all these counselors who are supposed to be allegedly like 16 or so, but obviously they're all like in their mid-20s.
If even that. So I'd argue some are easily in their 30s.
Right. And they all are like, it's the last day of camp, so they all have various different activities. And I love that David Wayne kind of described what they wanted to do as like a comedic version of like Nashville, where they have various different like storylines that are going on that all culminate by the end of it. And that's what happens, because you got like, Molly Shannon's off doing arts and crafts and dealing with her marriage falling apart. You got Michael Showalter kind of being the main kind of, awkward kid who's trying to get with the hot counselor played by Marguerite Monroe, but she's too busy with the bad boy played by Paul Rudd, and various other storylines that all revolve around this camp on their last day. And this was your good choice, Adam. So, what are your initial thoughts on Wet Hot American Summer?
I alluded to when I picked it that it's not one that I've ever been like crazy about. I've always realized, I guess, sort of the love for it and everything, but I just never got into it. I don't know, something about it. So my wife really loves it. I know a couple people who really love it, and I just never really gave it a fair shake. So going into it this time, I tried to go into it as fresh as I could. And I still have some issues with it, but it's so insane. The whole movie is like this weird fever dream. There's so many slapsticky bits that have nothing to do with the next bit at all. Like, yeah, there's a thorough line story in there, but it's just a bunch of disconnected, weird, crazy thoughts and shenanigans that go on that I just kind of found the whole thing nauseatingly charming. It's like the whole movie, I'm going, why? Like, what is happening here? But I kind of love it for that.
Yeah, it was definitely a movie that, like, when it came out, even it got a lot of, like, negative reviews, kind of in that camp of, like, what even is this? What's going on with this movie? It was definitely a movie that did not do very well when it was released theatrically, but is one of those, like, big comedy, like, home video hits. That, like, just spread around so much, like, with the either VHS or especially DVD. Like, oh my god, you gotta watch this, an underrated gem or whatever. And became a real cult classic in the way that, like, those sort of start of the millennium movies really were. And I think it's one of the better examples of, like, when you get people who are more adept to, like, sketch comedy, like these people were, doing a theatrical movie, oftentimes it just, like, really falls apart. It doesn't work very well. It feels like so, like, it is, like, sketches trying to become a story, but this movie does the ingenious thing of just, like, okay, we'll do the loosest possible story of last day at camp, a bunch of people are off doing, like, separate things or whatever, and that's a perfect vehicle to have sketchy style stuff, but at the same time make it into, like, really funny running jokes and, like, go back and forth and edit between the different storylines. And I would largely say, like, I think this movie's very funny. I've always really enjoyed it. There's, like, a couple of the comedic bits that I'm not as huge on necessarily, but it's one of those great kitchen sink comedies where if you don't like a joke, don't worry. In fucking, like, 2 minutes, you're gonna get another bizarre, weird joke that's gonna make you at least, like, say, oh, what the fuck is this? This is weird. Kind of fun thing to it.
Absolutely. Because there are several jokes in this that I'm like, ah. But then, like, just the most random shit will happen. That one in particular that I just lost my shit because it's so just random and matter of fact. It's after Ken Marino drops off Joe Lou Trulio and the other kids. He's driving in the van and he's singing. And his eyes are completely on the road. He's paying attention to what he's doing. And all of a sudden, oh, fuck. And it hits a giant tree. Like, how did he not see that coming? You know what I mean? Like, it's just so fucking funny to me.
There's stuff like that, and I also love, like, how they have that whole storyline where, like, Joe Trulio's off with the kids, like, on the raft, and it's like, oh, fuck, I gotta leave, I'm gonna get him, don't worry, I'll be right back, and then they go for a while where they're having, like, a chase scene, all these other storylines happen, and then, like, it's within, like, 15 minutes of the movie ending, they're like, oh my god, we gotta save the kids from going over the waterfall, and it cuts and the kids are about to go over the waterfall.
Yep.
Like, but I mean, for me, the stuff that makes me lose my shit, and I think this is the movie that made fucking Paul Rudd such a comedic superstar. Where, like, the whole scene where he's in the lunchroom and he just smacks his food away and Junior Garofalo's like, are you gonna pick that up? And his fucking whole, like, whining, like, oh,
like a toddler.
Yeah, like a toddler. His body language, this is, like, such a great physical comedy performance.
Just literally, just pick it up one piece at a time, drops, like, a piece of food.
Like, yeah. I don't think he doesn't even pick up the food. He just picks up the silverware and the plate, and then he just throws it on the table like. Ugh.
And then gives her like a is that enough shrug. So
but even, like, all the faces that dude fucking makes throughout this whole movie are spectacular.
His kissing is so fucking funny. It's so over the top and gross.
Right, anytime it's with Elizabeth Banks, particularly when he's doing his lifeguard duty and he's looking at Elizabeth Banks and he has that weird duck face lip, like, yeah, come on. Yeah. So good. It's so phenomenal. He is the MVP of this movie to me, but everyone else is, like, so committed. Even, like I mentioned, fucking future Academy Award nominee Bradley Cooper, very game to just do silly weird shit. He's, like, so fun. Like, all the stuff with him and Michael Ian Black, which I love how they have the elements where the campers are being, like, homophobic. The other ones are just like, oh man, he's probably gay, using some F slurs and whatnot. But then their relationship is genuinely very sweet and tender, and they, like, have the little marriage ceremony, and it's like, oh no, he's gay. He's like with him. I can't believe it. What? Oh, we gotta do something really bad. And then later on at the lunchroom, just like, hey, guess what? We bought you a credenza. They bring it in.
It's so stupid. And see, that was the part that I was worried wasn't going to hold up. And because I haven't seen it forever, and I watched it, I was like, oh no, they treat it, like, as a joke, but in a very earnest, sort of respectful fashion.
The joke at all is not on, like, the gay couple actually being,
no,
like, they're
it's
very
about
supportive,
how
they love
everybody
each other.
else reacts to it.
Exactly. It's so fucking funny. It's a parody of, like, a lot of those, comedies from that era would have terrible dated jokes like that about, like, gay couples and shit like that. It would be like disastrous. And then they just do a perfect parody. Like that's the thing is, it's so rare to parody a comedy, but this movie does such a great job of parodying like that genre. With even like the whole thing where they're gonna do the baseball game, and it's just like, yeah, we're gonna win it, and we're gonna beat the other team. They've been winning for so long, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna win. And the kids are like, that seems kind of trite. Should we really do that? Yeah, you're right. And the bus comes over, just like, yeah, we're not gonna do it. They say it's trite. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And they leave.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, there's so many great moments. I mean, like I said, of course the oh fuck scene, but then the chase after with the hay bale.
Yes.
Like he can't get around the hay bale, like it's so ridiculous. And Maloney's whole bit where he'll say something totally weird and then people will question him about it. I mean, it's an act you've seen 100 times, but that's the one thing about Maloney in this. He is playing this weird, like food sex obsessed chef at this camp completely straight.
Yes.
In comparison to everybody else, like Paul Rudd and everybody who's going a little bit over the board. He's almost intimidating.
Right, he's using his sort of like traditional dramatic acting chops you would see on like the fucking cop shows or whatever to play this guy who wants to like hump a fucking refrigerator
Wants to fuck a fridge. Yeah.
Right, and talks to his sentient can of vegetables voiced by H. John Benjamin, of course.
Yep. It's so fucking funny. And that's the thing. It reminds me of, even with, a lot of people don't even realize it, but Maloney's Freak Show and Harold and Kumar, the first one.
Yes.
And he's so fucking funny in that. Like, I always forget the chops that he has as far as comedic stuff. And this one just made me remember it so much. But another thing is too, I love the movie Role Models, which is also David Wayne, of course.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm watching this movie and I'm like, oh, that's Gary in Role Models. Oh, that's him in Role Models. It's like everybody.
Yeah.
It's David Wayne has that troupe of guys who will just stay with him.
Yeah, like a lot of people who would graduate, like I said, from like State or Stella. That was funny. Like wasn't as familiar with those, so I watched a bunch of clips.
The State, I remember. The State was MTV, right?
Yeah, that was MTV, and like I said, they had a lot like Thomas Lennon and Ben Garrett as well before they did Real 911. But the Stella was like, it's just like David Wayne, Michael Ian Black, and Michael Showalter. They did them a lot as like sort of shorts that would like air initially like on the internet, and then they eventually got a Comedy Central show. But the old shorts, there's one where they do like a dumb yoga class thing, and the other two patrons are Elizabeth Banks and Bradley Cooper, and this was before Wet Hot American Summer. So they utilize all those people that they've had for a while, and they carry them over, and they are always very committed, particularly like with the chase scene that you were mentioning earlier. What I love about something like that with a stupid hay bale bit is it's dumb comedy done so smart. Like these people are incredibly intelligent about like, let's shoot this in a way that looks almost like cinematic and make it like this big suspenseful sequence over him not being able to go over fucking hay barrel. So
right,
dumb.
Absolutely. And then when the chase culminates at nighttime, Joe Lutrulio, when he comes tearing ass into the camp, and it's so obviously a stunt double, and they make no attempt to try to hide the fact. And he's doing like 360s and all this shit, and then it stops, and it's just stupid little Joe Lutrulio. It's so funny to me because, there's movies where you can pick out, you're like, oh, that's a stunt double, but they are making no bones about it. Like, clearly this is a stunt double. It's so funny to me, and I love, like you said, that stupid comedy done smartly.
Yeah, and like it's all around. Like I love also Jeanine Garofalo is just like the completely socially inept camp director. Is so fun with stuff like, I want to impress David Hyde Pierce. What should I do? Just like, I don't know, maybe wear like a nice dress. Oh shit, you're good. She's that impressed by something that simple. It's so fucking funny. And I think like there's also like all sorts of other things with like I love the montage that happens when they go to town. Yes.
It was good to get away, even if it was just for an hour. The guy snatches the old lady's purse. They're doing coke, then it becomes crack, and then heroin. And this is insanity. And then, it was an hour long. Yeah.
Shannon, I love, like, of the people who I think are underrated, like, Zach Orth is the guy who plays JJ, like, the big, boisterous camp dude, who is, like, so fucking funny. Every time he does like something silly like that, like the stealing the purse, or he's one of the guys with like the credenza or whatever. Like everybody, like there's no like small part basically. Everyone does such a great. Even like the whole montage that happens later with like Michael Showalter and Christopher Maloney about like they're doing either like a running montage but also a dance training montage, and like they're doing 5 different montages at once. Like it's a movie that knows like once again this subgenre, but is also just like let's just do random weird shit, and most of it I would say sticks. Is there anything that doesn't stick that well to you?
I think Michael Showalter is the weak link of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like him. It might be the way he delivers his lines, or what. But I will say, when he's the talent show host, I think he's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely hilarious. But as the normal kid, I find him almost, even though obviously it's the point, it's a parody, but I find it so aggressively whiny and depressed, where it's like it turns me off a little bit.
Yeah, I think, I guess of like the main characters, like he doesn't have necessarily as much funny stuff to do in that particular persona, but I still think there's fun stuff, particularly when he has his makeover and he becomes the tough guy, just like, hey, I just wanted to say, I'm leaving. And you don't need to bother me anymore. Like I stuff like that's pretty fun. But yeah, I agree. I think the other character, the old man entertainer who's the fucking host of the talent show, is his funniest bits. Where
it's
especially
great.
It's perfect anti-comedy, which I think like it's very hit or miss for me. That kind of like, oh, we're making fun of the fact this isn't very funny. But it's so stellar the way that people react to him doing the same fucking like Flintstones gags. But just like when we were doing our homework when I was a kid, we were doing our slabs. Everyone's like like dying.
I know. It's so good.
It's so fucking good. There's some stuff obviously like even with like we mentioned like some of the more progressive things. There's some stuff that like does age weirdly. Like I would say the use of some of like the kid characters, a lot of it can be funny. I like a lot of stuff with Molly Shannon, like trying to deal with her marriage. But then where they go the extra step at the end, where it's just like, oh hey, here's my husband. And it's like we're gonna get married. It's like the kid who was counseling her.
Yeah, I agree.
Stuff like there's a few gags like that feel like they're a bit like okay, this hasn't aged. I get what they're going for, but it also just feels.
But again, I don't think it aged well at the time. It feels like one of those jokes that just carries on a little too much. Like the fact that he's counseling her and stuff is really funny, but for them to take it that extra step, you're like, it's unnecessary.
Hold up as well, but it's so great seeing just all these comedic talents at such an early point where they're still just even on point. Like fucking Amy Poehler as this fucking camp director who's just like so obsessed with like getting the play right perfectly. And it's just like, oh, by the way, you're going to see this performance of Godspell. These kids are shit. I don't know what the fuck they're doing.
They're doing Godspell too, by the way.
Right. And I love that too, where like they do the whole performance. It's actually a genuinely good performance, and the moment instead everyone just boos them aggressively. It's so good. But yeah, I also even like just on a filmmaking level, like there's clearly a cheapness to this movie, obviously, because it only cost like $1.8 million. I love that there was a whole story where Paul Rudd said, I don't even think I got paid for this movie. Like I think they were so strapped for cash they forgot to give me a check. The cheapness works because if you watch any of those summer camp comedies, they look about as cheap as this fucking movie does.
Oh yeah, definitely.
To the degree that, like, when I was watching this movie, I almost thought for a second, did they shoot this at the same fucking camp of our other movie, Sleepaway Camp? Because it looks, like, identical.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think that is the case.
No, because this was in Massachusetts. The other one was in New Jersey. I also think it works perfectly because this feels like it would be the last time a movie this cheap would actually be shot on film. Because we're talking 2001. And, like, if this were shot, like, only a year and a half later, it would be totally digital and not nearly work as well, I would say.
Look, yeah, it looks shitty, and that's what makes it work. I completely agree.
Right.
Yeah, if this thing was super polished, it wouldn't work. It is the sort of ragtag, ramshackle appearance of the whole thing, and that you know that this is just a passion project or labor of love for these guys is what makes it so endearing.
Yeah, look to the Netflix miniseries they did, which were a lot more polished.
And not very good.
Yeah, I would say the first one they did was at least a bit more funny because they went even further with the joke of they don't look like teenagers with like, oh, we're doing this the first day of camp and everyone's like 20 years older. And I think there's like some funny bits in that one. The sequel one is pretty dire. There's not a lot of funny shit in that.
I didn't watch the sequel one at all.
Yeah, I didn't until recently. And it was just, especially when those are both like fucking 8 episodes long. This is a comedy that barely sustains itself at like, what, 95 minutes? The original movie is?
Yeah.
You can't really stretch that out much farther because it'll just fall apart at the seams if you do it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, the miniseries, great, whatever. I get it. Like, you know, Netflix will buy anything. But you don't need anything more than this. You don't need anything more that's 90 to 95 minutes. This weird little fucking thing. Like, it's barely a movie. It's a series of disconnected thoughts put together with a very basic last day of camp plotline. And it's so crazy that that's why it works. So, like you said, for them to get any polish to it and set down to, anywhere between 4 to 6 hour long episode, it makes it fall apart. It becomes too much.
Yeah, and even with like the other David Wayne movies that he's done, like I like Role Models. I like They Came Together, which is a pretty fun one, like the romantic comedy spoof with Paul Rudd and Amy Poehler. Like I like those movies decently, but I don't think any of them quite have like that same fun kind of like spirit of just random fun that this one does. If you want like another looser one that I think really falls apart is something like Wanderlust. The one with Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd.
Yeah, I agree. I think Wanderlust has some good bits, but for the most part, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it falls apart a lot more. And do you think that's maybe just like the weird youthful ambition that they had in this particular movie? Or do you think, like, what makes you say maybe like a Role Models maybe is your favorite, right? Of his movies?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
What would you say makes like maybe that or Wet Hot American Summer work better than like some of the other ones they would do later?
More attention put on it, maybe more studio involvement, maybe, let's face it, we've talked about before, but once some of these guys who do smaller projects and things like that get kind of a bigger budget and get it kind of a lot of times it might fail. I think a lot of these guys, their brilliance comes from what they have at their disposal, what they can make happen, and I think that's a lot of times what works for these guys. So almost when they get this, bunch of locations and more money and more celebrity status and more it just tends to fall apart.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of these people have gone on to do great things, especially like I love whenever someone like say Ken Marino pops up in something. Like he's a perfect.
I love that guy so much.
Yeah,
he's he can play such a douchebag, like more than most people. Like even in Role Models, where he gets right in Paul Rudd's face, and he's like, "Oh, well, I have you in my personal bubble here." Like it's so fucking funny, and he's so funny in this as the Virgin, which is great. But yeah, I love Ken Marino. I'm not necessarily talking about the actors. I mean, because a lot of these people did go on to do big things. Obviously, Bradley Cooper, Amy Poehler, Paul Rudd, Elizabeth Banks—they're all superstars. I'm more or less referencing like David Wayne and those guys who, not to say that I don't want them to succeed and be successful, and they are, which is great. But you're almost missing the hunger out of the movies now.
Well, right, and plus, like, some of them moved on. Like, I think Michael Showalter has had a better career, especially as a very recent, with stuff like The Big Sick, or My Name is Doris, where he's gone on to be like, let's do more, like, drama, comedy kind of things that, like, have a bit more character to them, but while still having some of these funny elements at the same time. And I think that's probably the thing that, like, Wayne has felt a bit more lost, I think, especially recently, in, like, an age where comedies aren't as, like, profitable necessarily, and he's just like, oh, what do I do? Oh, how about I go on the back of like my, big cult success with Wet Hot American Summer and do these like big elaborate miniseries where I can do whatever the fuck I want with a lot of money. And I think that it's like you said, it like really necessity is the mother of invention, because without that you wouldn't get stuff like, oh, let's let Paul do a bunch of fucking facial expressions and see what happens, and you get gold out of that. Beautiful comedy gold.
Pure gold.
But let's go ahead and do our final thoughts, because we have another stellar movie to talk about.
Yes, we do.
Oh boy. So your final thoughts on Wet Hot American Summer?
Like I said, it's crazy. This movie's crazy. It's this weird comedic fever dream of just people going for it, improv and being nutcases, and you just got to go along for the ride. And I think you said it best. Like if there's a bit you don't like, just wait a minute. There's at best 5 minutes. You're bound to get one of the jokes that happens in 5 minutes, and you're about to find it funny. If not, then maybe you're not into comedy, because this movie is wacky. It's just, and I hate using that term. Oh, look how wacky, but it is that. It's just this weird, crazy, wacky movie, and for all of its faults and limitations, it kind of serves it even more. It's a special little thing.
What these guys sort of excelled at to me is that like there is that wackiness, but it isn't like they don't have that same tone of just like, oh, we're going wacky, we're trying really hard to make you like laugh, look at we're doing like clown shit. They're just like very naturally wacky in a way that almost feels like nonchalant, like they're throwing off bizarre weird shit, which makes it even funnier. Stuff like when they're doing the whole thing about like, oh, let's meet back up here in 10 years. Yeah. When you want to meet up, like at 9:30? Yeah, I think 9:30, because I have something at 11. I'm not going to push that. Or whatever for something fucking 10-year later bullshit. Like they toss off bizarre bullshit like that and make it so casual. And that's, I think, the big strength of this movie. It's very casually, naturally bizarre and weird and consistently very fun. But Adam, it's time we talk about another very special, very scrappy little movie, Sleepaway Camp.
Dear Mom and Dad, I've been at a sleepaway camp for almost 3 weeks. And I'm getting very scared.
Welcome to Sleepaway Camp. Someone is watching you.
Hey, Baba, Reba!
Someone is waiting for you. Someone wants to scare you to death. Sleepaway Camp. You won't be coming home.
So, Sleepaway Camp came out November 18th, 1983, from writer-director Robert Hiltzik. This was his first film, and shocker, his last one for a while until he returned for the fourth film in the Sleepaway Camp franchise. Shockingly, he didn't have a huge career necessarily. But Sleepaway Camp is very much, it's a horror film, so obviously skirting the rules a bit with the summer camp comedy element of it. A very small, little scrappy independent movie to try and kind of ape on the success of Friday the 13th. Only cost $350,000 and made $11 million, so quite successful considering that small budget. And this movie has a lot of infamy to it, mainly based around the ending, which maybe we should just address directly now. Is a very loaded ending, has a lot of problematic elements to it, especially in modern parlance, but that was like such a bizarre ending that I was aware of before I saw this movie like a couple of years ago. Like that was the infamous thing about it, and we'll go into more detail I guess as we go along. But what I love so much about this movie is like from minute one it is making baffling, bizarre, unsanctioned decisions that like make this like the ending just like one of many bizarre things, to the degree that despite being much more straight-laced as like a horror like slasher film in its attempts, is very consistently unintentionally hysterical. This is a great so bad it's good movie to me. Would you agree with that, Adam?
I mean, absolutely. I fucking love this movie, and I understand and I can appreciate for all its faults and things that are wrong with it, because there is a lot, but there is so much just earnest charm here where they were really trying to make something, and you could see it all over the place, and it makes it that much better and that much more charming. I mean, dude, like you said, from the opening couple minutes where you got the boat scene where that little girl is just hysterically screaming and crying through the
There's
whole
a boat!
No, there's kids in the water. Oh my God, there's a kid in the water. But then it just cuts to exit all outside ambience, all outside noise, and you get John. And then it cuts again. And I'll never forget the first time I saw that. I was like, what the fuck is this?
Okay, just for if you're unaware, folks, like the opening of this movie, like after it has like a sweeping shot for some reason of like the camp closed, then it cuts to several years earlier where we have two kids and their dad on a little pontoon boat, and they're out having fun.
Buddy?
Right, their dad's buddy, who's just like, hey, the doc's coming. So it's a weird thing where it's like, are you talking about a doctor, or are you talking about the dad's wife, or who are you talking about? There's a weird, bizarre implications of that. And at the same time, there's three teenagers, one of which is on the skis in the back, and the other two are driving the boat, who are just like, oh, hey, I guess we can go ahead and let you drive for a bit. I don't know, just, I might lose my job, but why don't you just chill out? And then they have like the scene where they decapitate at least one of the kids.
Yeah, they do decapitate the kid. And that's where you get John.
Yes, but then it cuts to my favorite character in fiction.
The aunt?
I love the aunt so much.
Out of her mind.
Okay, because the thing is, after this happens, with this setup of like, oh, one of the kids died, then they cut over and it's established that the aunt is taking care of the daughter who survived. At least what's revealed initially is the daughter who survived, and like she's been living with them and hanging out with her cousin
Ricky,
played by Jonathan Tiersten, who we'll talk about as well. There's a lot with that. But their aunt, like they're two like regular kids who're just like, oh, we're gonna go off to camp or whatever. Angela's a bit shy and he's a bit more of the outgoing kid. And then their aunt comes in, like she's a fucking character out of like a 30s movie and dressed up like she's a Dr. Seuss character.
Yeah, and picture like looks wise, like if she was Zoe Deschanel in Roald Dahl's Witches.
Yes,
Like,
I think she could be one of the witches, like in their disguises or whatnot. Because she comes in, she's just like, "Oh, I can't believe we're all going off to camp! Isn't that so great? Here, I packed you a lunch." And he's like, "Are there any chips in there?" "Oh yeah, I believe there's a whole bag." I'm just like, "Who the fuck is this? What's going on?"
No, that won't do.
No,
that won't do at all.
My favorite. She does these weird asides. Like she's like, "That wouldn't do at all." Now, where did I put my bag? I put a string around my finger. Like what?
What the fuck is happening here? She's wearing bright blues and red berets, and
her beret looks like it's a Cat in the Hat stripes.
dude, the Who's live under that thing.
And she's just like, "Oh, here are your physicals. Don't tell them how you got those."
Yeah, which is also crazy,
right?
But then it's like, once they get to camp, you get sort of like where Ricky used to be like the tough, cool kid at camp, but maybe now he's being outshined. And then, it gets to, which I think might even be a little bit more problematic than the ending. Because I'd argue, of course, the ending is what it is, but
I know what you're talking about with at least like the most lascivious, creepy elements. Yeah, there's the cook who like watches these kids come in and says like, "Oh, I love fresh meat," and all this. Is like he's clearly a pedophile who wants to like sexually assault these kids.
Yeah, he
tries to, and it's very upsetting. But it's even more upsetting where the other cooks, like he openly talks about this, and the other cooks are just kind of nonchalant. Particularly Robert Earl Jones, father of James. He's like, "Oh man, those kids don't even know what you're talking about." Like,
yeah, I don't even want to say the term the cook uses for him.
No, I wouldn't. I don't either. Yeah, it's very disgusting.
But like he says it, and that Jones is like, oh, like no, dude, no, report this fucking guy. But then it goes even as far as like where the camp owner is involved, where he's trying to date one of the campers,
right? The counselors, right? Yeah. By the way, Mike Kellen playing Mel, who I just love that, like, the guy who runs this New Jersey fucking camp is the most just, like, he looks like he's, like, a 40s gangster character actor.
I love it. And he beats the piss out of Ricky.
Right, when the deaths start happening, he thinks it's Ricky. He's just like, "You son of a bitch! I know you tried to do this!" It's just like, he's like a fucking 14-year-old kid. What are you doing?
I know. I love half-shirt jock camp counselor.
Yes.
Like, "Hey, what's going on over here?" This big muscle-bound idiot in bike shorts and a fucking tube top.
Oh yeah, Ronnie. Yeah, I love Ronnie because he's weirdly the most empathetic of any of the fucking counselors. He's the one who like gives a shit about the kids to any degree.
100%.
But he's wearing these like fucking super tight bike shorts, and then later on, there's a point where like all these deaths have happened, and Mel is just like, "Oh, I gotta close up. It's over. We're done. It's over." And he's just like, "I don't know. Why don't you finish out the summer, dude?" No,
what the fuck? No,
you don't finish out the summer.
like 3 kids have died, bro. You got it. And the whole thing is like the kids are dying. Like, well, we gotta wait to tell the parents.
Right?
Like, no. Wait a minute. What do you do with the corpses then? Like, what is happening?
Well, look, they're shining him off over to Officer Mustache.
Oh yeah.
Which I love. This character's introduced initially, this mustachioed cop. He's just like, "Oh, I guess, I'll come back if there's any problems." And later on he comes back, and clear that actor shaved, because he has the worst marker fucking version of a mustache. It's even like, it's black marker, and it's like, that dude had brown hair. It doesn't
I know.
match
It's
at all.
great. It's great, though. It's absolutely great. And then they try to play up on that in the 4th one.
Wait, I haven't seen any of the sequels.
Oh, well, the 2nd and 3rd one are really bad, but they're kind of fun. They're kitschy. They're in on the joke. In the second.
Yeah, I've heard Pamela Springsteen, sister of Bruce, is pretty fun as Angela in the other ones. But
not bad.
Anyway,
not bad.
But to get back, yes. They're in the middle of all this. Like, what they're obviously, it's like a summer camp slasher thing where kids are getting picked off one by one. But in between, you have all this stuff with like the various campers, and there is so much fun. Like, you referenced this at the top of the show, but the whole baseball scene. Yep. Where it goes on, by the way, for fuck. You see like the whole baseball game
for fucking ever, dude.
It's for so long. But then you have like fucking Ricky with the best comeback possible.
I think maybe ever, right? Yeah, eat shit and die. Eat shit and live. It's just mwah,
Perfect.
mwah.
It's so amazing.
Beautiful.
Like, you should have ended the game there. It's like, no, you guys won. Like, there's no point in playing
Yeah,
this
no,
game
fuck.
anymore.
Well, there's nothing we can do about this now. How do you feel Felissa Rose does in this?
I mean, you can tell she's a young child actress who doesn't have a lot of experience necessarily. But at the same time, I think they use that weirdly to their advantage in terms of, like, kind of spoilers, everybody, for this fucking 40-year-old movie. Angela is the killer. But they do a lot of stuff where, like, she's just staring off into, like, nothingness.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes it's very funny, where it's just, like, it's just awkward the way that she's just sitting there doing nothing. But then sometimes it is genuinely unnerving, particularly any close-ups,
Yes.
where it's just like, this is fucking unsettling and weird.
It's
This kid.
weird. Yeah,
Right,
it's
yeah.
weird. That's the one thing you can say about, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's like a masterful performance or anything, but she's a young child actress. But it's weird. There's enough eeriness about the whole thing where it works. And I guess that's what I was going to get into. Or I guess we might as well just broach it now.
Yeah.
Where it ends up that Angela was actually the boy that the aunt decided to raise as a girl.
Yes.
You had him grow his hair out, or her, however you want to. I mean, it's I wouldn't even know how to do the pronouns for this.
I mean, she identifies as Angela. I would say she.
But it's a forced identification.
Yeah. I mean, she at least refers to herself as Angela, at least for the most part or whatever. I
True.
would say, yeah, right. She doesn't refer to herself as, like, Peter was, like, the boy's name originally or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, right. But see, the thing is about the whole, at least in my opinion, the transgenderness of it all. It doesn't feel like it's the taboo thing. I think the reason why it's shocking is because the way it's revealed. It's super iconic, and it does pack a fucking punch.
It's obviously done for, like, the shock value of, like, the additional twist. It's kind of like trying to, like, oh, you know, Psycho came out 20 years ago. What do we do? Like, we add the additional twist of it being this trans person. Like, obviously, we're not very equipped to talk about that.
No.
It's
But we're
cis
talking about the
men,
movie.
right?
I think we gotta at
Right,
least address.
right. That's true. I think, like, it's definitely, like, what it's trying to do is much more of, like, the shock value of, like, oh, this additional twist or whatever, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, like, obviously, like, the implications of the twist, but I will agree that it's weird where, like, the ineptitude of the movie kind of works in its favor for this, because the way they reveal this is that Angela's, like, standing in the middle of, like, this, by the docks, and she has the severed head.
Decapitated a boy. Yeah.
Right, who, by the way, is smiling for some reason. I'm sure he kept that whole pose as he was being fucking beheaded that whole time. Sure, it makes total sense.
Oh,
right?
yeah, me too. I would, but for a different reason. I'd be like, finally.
Finally, it's over. But Angela's holding this boy's head, and her face is, like, open mouth, and she has this weird guttural noise that's coming out of her, and she's naked, fully, and it's obviously, like, a guy in a mask.
I want to say, because I've watched, like, the full-length documentary on this, which is very good, by the way. I believe it's, like, a 20 to 22-year-old, like, Filipino man that they used for it because he's smaller in stature and everything, and then they put that really creepy prosthetic mask on.
Right, there was a mold of Felissa Rose's face.
It's terrifying.
The cheapness of, like, the mask almost makes it look creepier, because they cut between, like, shots of that and, like, shots of just, like, Felissa Rose, I believe's her head, just kind of, like, paused like that.
Which doesn't work as well. I think the mask works better.
Right, I mean, I would agree with that, but I think that contrast makes it almost creepier.
Yeah, it's got this weird ethereal sort of feel to it.
Right, where, like, I think on a filmmaking level, I think it's fascinating. I get why it became iconic, but also, obviously, it's, like, kind of othering trans people and more specific, like, oh, the reason that she's a murderer is because
she's trans. No, I agree.
Right. It's 'cause,
but I also think that what they do that is smartly, at least, again, we're not very equipped to talk about this, but I think that the fact that her aunt clearly is psychotic and force these sort of things on her explains the break. Not the fact that she's trans, is that her aunt totally forced her to be something that she either might or might not be, but did it through sort of psychological manipulation.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, regardless of, like, I agree that ending is, like, shocking, and I get why it was very popular at the same time. All of the stuff I love about this movie is less to do with that, and just more of, like,
100%.
the weird shenanigans that happened before that point.
Dude, the fucking curling iron kill. What?
Right. But I will say, like, despite how inept a lot of this movie is, the kills, or at least, like, the horror sequences are very even, like, the piece of shit, like, awful pedophile killer who doesn't technically die but gets horribly scalded, that effect is very good.
Yeah, you see it happening, the skin bubbling and boiling.
All the blisters and stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
It's very well done.
Or the one kid who they find his body and, like, the snake is crawling through or whatever.
Yeah,
the dummy.
Or the
Looks
kid
really
with the
good.
the kid with the bee stings.
Yes. But what I love is just like all those kills are even more interesting where like those are very well made, but the lead up to them is full of just stupid shit. Like when before that canoe kid is found, the one counselor who's just like, "Oh my god, the shit's everywhere. What the fuck? What the fuck's happening?" He's like having an aneurysm, just like throwing shit at him. There's that, or the lead up to the bee kill where the kid's just like, "Oh, I gotta take a wicked dump in there."
Yeah. Yep. And it also does it very poorly done. "Oh, it's you. What are you doing here?" Does that quite a bit. Where, you're like, well, it's clearly somebody.
Right. My favorite example of this is they have a little point where, like right before the curling iron kill, where you see quote unquote Angela, but it's clearly Jonathan Tiersten in a wig.
Clearly Jonathan Tiersten in a wig.
Clearly this movie was not designed with home video in mind whatsoever,
Yes.
or digital HD in particular. You
Yeah.
can see him crystal clear. It's so
Yep.
fucking funny. But my favorite version of this, though, is when Meg ends up dying, who is the counselor that, as you mentioned, is like attempting, like is trying to get with this creepy older fucking manager dude. It's so weird, all that, the way that's handled. But she ends up dying horribly in the shower in a really great scene of just like getting stabbed through the back. Really well done. But then when he fucking discovers her body and his monologue he gives is one of my favorite fucking
it's
things.
So good.
Oh,
It's so good.
not you, Meg. I knew this was him. This was fucking Jonathan.
I'll
Tiersten.
get him,
I'm gonna
Meg.
get him.
I'll get him, Meg. I know it's Ricky. I'll get him. What bastard? That damn bastard. You're like, yeah, man. Yeah, he gets on him. Like, he's like one of the monkeys who finds the rock or the log in Space Odyssey. Just hammer fists him. You'd think to death. Like, it's crazy. God, I knew it was you. Oh, no. Oh, you killed Meg. Like, bro, take it easy. Well, I mean, maybe not take it easy. You did find a murdered child. But on the aspect, that's a murder child you were trying to date. So maybe take it down a notch.
Or also, more importantly, just like, do you think this scrawny little fucker actually managed to do all of these elaborate murders?
Well, but to be fair, Angela did. And she was a scrawny little kid.
Right, and of course, Jonathan Tiersten went off on those horrible tirades where he's cursing, which apparently got him the job, which I love. He curses like a small kid, and it's so funny every time. Like, someone throws a water balloon at Angela, and she's just like, "You motherfucking pieces of shit, I'm gonna fucking kill you all the
No, it's great.
Which, by the way, we should bring up about Jonathan Tiersten here. Yeah, a sidebar. This is a thing that Adam introduced me to, and I love it so much.
It's my favorite thing in the world. It literally might be my favorite. I discovered Jonathan Tiersten on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, Jonathan Tiersten from Sleepaway Camp. I know him. I know who he is. I'll send him a friend request. He added me almost instantly, which is very surprising. I'm like, okay, cool. So he goes on these very long anti-Trump diatribes about look what Trump has ruined for our country, and it's time for us to wake up as Americans and also people of color. It's time to take charge and stand up for yourself, and the dollar's only a cent away from bottoming out, and it's this huge long thing, and then it's a picture of his face like doing duck face, or without his shirt on, or holding a tennis racket, or like,
well, what I love is like it's not just like political things.
My favorite one ever is when supposedly Jonathan Tiersten was in a party store, for lack of because I don't remember, a 7-Eleven. And somebody was being rude to supposedly the Muslim cashier, and Jonathan Tiersten confronted the guy. He's like, "Fuck you, man, Bob, take it outside." And the guy's like, "I'll kick your ass." And then the guy turned around and met my gaze and knew I would take him out of there in a body bag. And there's Jonathan Tiersten without a shirt on, smiling in the picture. And you're like, "Yeah, man, you got him."
Boom, roast.
Boom, roasted. We got to post one of them. I've sent you a couple, which are my favorites.
Oh no, that's the thing. Adam and I have made just like a thing of this where like he'll send me these, and it's 90% of why I still have a Facebook account. It's just to like see these.
Jonathan Tiersten. It's the best.
It's like, one, communicate with Adam, two, to see these fucking Jonathan Tiersten pics.
My girlfriend wanted a picture of my face, and it's him and his nipple. And you're like, okay, all right, man, Jesus. One of my favorite, again, one more time. Are we slaves to the art, or is the art slaves to us?
Yes.
And he's sitting there with a tennis racket, got his arm around some dude he teaches tennis to.
Just imagine like one of those inspirational like post memes that like your aunt posts on Facebook.
Yep.
But instead of like a tree in the background or whatever, it's the text of it and then a picture of Jonathan Tierson just doing a duck face like
Yep.
with the, like a
Leaned
peace
over.
sign or whatever the fuck.
Yep. Or leaned over or holding a guitar.
Or there's one that I saw where it was like him almost like in a bathtub or something like that, and he's just kind of like hanging
I've
out
seen
or whatever.
those. Yep, seen those.
It's so. And by the way, if Mr. Tierson,
if you're listening, dude, we love you.
no, keep doing it. Don't even think about that. We're laughing. We love it. It genuinely cheers me up every time I see it.
Every time. Every
so
time.
good.
I absolutely love it.
Please just keep being you. Dude,
100%.
We love you so much.
And you know what? I don't think anything we would say would dissuade him from being him. That guy is committed.
No, he's very self-assured of himself, and you can even tell that from like this movie because like I love his performance because and the big thing about this movie that we haven't really talked about is the fact that unlike a lot of these other like summer camp, whether horror or comedy or otherwise, most of these people are like actual kids. Like they went for like most of them are like at most like age 16.
Yeah, I think for any of the ones who are show nudity, they're 18. Like that's as high as they went.
Well, no, right, but I mean, most of them are children, and I love the fact that like you get these weird, bizarre performances. Like we mentioned, the water skier earlier, clearly like a child who's like maybe 12.
Yeah,
it's just like going off, just
having a meltdown.
Right, having a meltdown. Or even like I love there's the one scene where like they're showing him rules of capture the flag, and it's the two counselors who are clearly like 15 or 16. And there's the one who's like trying to be very sincere, but all right, everybody, we're gonna play capture the flag. It's very simple. You have your flag on this side, flag on this side. Someone's gonna pull your flag, and it'll be fine. And the one guy who's like has the flag in his hand, it looks like he's trying to like look like he's eating it, like something an actual dumb kid would do. It's really endearingly charming.
Yeah, 100%. Some idiot kid would do that to get a laugh.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I will say, you know, as much as we love him, and I still think Tiersten is probably the best in the movie.
He has like the most personality in a really fun way that I really enjoy watching. Where he's just like I love when he goes into the school dance and he has that fucking 10-gallon hat, the fucking cowboy hat.
It is the best
for whatever reason. But it feels like a decision a dumb kid would make at that point. Like, yeah, this looks cool.
Yeah, no, dude, I'm so cool. This fucking hat. Yep.
Or even like they're the two teenagers who like go up to Felicia Rose and they're just like, oh man, something's wrong with Angela. And there's the one guy who delivers one of my favorite lines, just like, yo, Angela, why you so fucked up? Once again, something a dumb kid would say immediately without any kind of understanding of empathy or feelings. Just like such a fucking dumb bullshit thing to say.
Fucked up. It's like either a dumb kid or like fucking Polly Walnuts. Hey, why you so fucked up?
It feels insanely East Coast in a great way. This feels so much like a movie made in Jersey.
It's very Jersey. Oh, it's very Jersey.
In the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God. Because there's even like, we haven't talked about Judy, who I love.
Oh, I love Judy.
Who is like the mean girl.
Yeah, she takes the curling iron death.
She's playing it like she's a femme fatale from the 40s. And
Yep.
It's so fucking funny. Shout out Karen Fields. So funny. Where especially the bit where she's addressing Felicia Rose, and she's just like, oh, well, I guess you don't want to show anybody that you haven't gone through puberty yet, right? Because you're a carpenter's dream, flies a board in need of a screw. And it's just like, of course, this is a kid who has no idea what they're saying, who is
absolutely
fully committed to selling it, even though she has no idea what this means. It's so fucking funny.
Mm-hmm. And her side pony is amazing.
And her shirt that just says Judy on it.
Right, I want that shirt. I would wear that shirt.
100%. This is just Judy, not even your name. It's like, no, I want to wear the Judy.
Judy. I want to wear a shirt that says Judy. I bet you could buy it. If not, we should make it.
I mean, look, shocker, it's very easy to probably make that shirt.
Yeah, well, let's get on it, man. But no, I agree that this, you know, like we said, even about our last movie, the certain sense of charm due to its low budgetness and the earnestness in which it was made. And that's this movie too. There's two different types of sleaze in horror as far as I'm concerned, especially from the era. You got like Maniac, which is dirty sleaze. Like that movie's gross and dirty and you feel every minute of how gross and it's unnerving. This is like fun sleazy. Like it's sleazy, but it's super fun because it's so over the top crazy.
Right, where it feels almost like with whatever Robert Hiltzik was trying to do with this movie, it feels like less like, oh, an inept filmmaker is trying to make this movie, and more of an alien is trying to make a ripoff of Friday the 13th.
Right, and also it feels like maybe if you turned the dial just 1 to 2 degrees to the left, you'd have a comedy.
Right.
You know, it's just there's so much goofy and weird characters here, and just these oddball situations that it's almost a comedy. It's almost a comedy.
Right. It almost feels like it's an AI generation of like you put a bunch of like summer camp horror or comedy movies into an AI generator.
And this is the one they write. Yeah.
It looks like one of those DALL-E recreations of like whatever the fuck, like just like sleepaway camp horror movie. It's just like this is what it is. It vaguely looks like that. It's not quite though. It's not quite human.
Right, and then somebody did that, so I was like, "Fuck it, make it." Yep, 100%.
Give him $350,000 no work. And like there are so many Friday the 13th ripoffs from that era that are so forgettable and whatever.
Oh yeah, Madman.
Madman is like the key example to me.
Yeah, Prowl.
The Prowler at least has like the Tom Savini effect. Well, I wouldn't.
The Burning has the Tom Savini effect, and it doesn't work.
Right. I mean, I think Prowler and that one are quite frankly very similar boat of like great Tom Savini effects, not much else.
Yeah.
As opposed to this movie doesn't have like obviously that level of special effects, but just good enough to where you're like, oh, I'm kind of impressed. And the linking material between that, which could just be the typical like, oh, hey, we're counselors and we're going to go off and have sex, forget about the kids who we don't really even see. Like Friday the 13th didn't introduce actual kids to the camp until like what, fucking 6 or whatever.
Yeah, I want to say it was 6 when they were all sleeping and Jason was
right.
working.
It's mostly just the counselors going off like, hey, let's smoke some weed and then have sex and then get killed by Jason. As opposed to this movie, just like all the linking material is just bizarre, crazy shit that like no one else would come up with. Just insane. And I agree that like it's only because like this was in a bit of a dry spell for Friday the 13th this was able to be successful at all. Like I can see no other point where it's just like, oh, there's a Friday the 13th. What do we do? Well, let's go see Sleepaway Camp. I'm sure that'll be fun. And yeah, I think it's earned a certain bizarre cult status for a reason.
It worked. People went and saw it. I mean, the movie made a fortune on its budget anyways.
Right. But when you mentioned like I guess you've seen the sequels and I guess they don't recreate that same magic necessarily.
No, the second and third one are too in on the joke, and the fourth one brings back all of the original cast that's alive.
Yeah. And
it's so really low budget, and it's just they're going for the same jokes again, and it's just it doesn't work. It's really bad. Like 2 and 3 I'm not crazy about, but 4 is abysmal.
Yeah, I guess 4 because that's the one that Hiltzik came back for. I guess I've heard a lot of people compare it to like, you know, Tommy Wiseau or other people where like they make the unintentionally funny movie and then they try and do one that's like we're in on the joke and it doesn't work. You're saying?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly the case.
Yeah, because you can't recreate fucking magic that's in this fucking movie. Like, the bit where, we haven't mentioned much about, like, Angela's love interest, the young boy who, like, I love how he comes up to her at one point, like, puts his hands in front of her eyes and just like, guess who? Ricky? No. Guess again. Burt Reynolds? Like, she goes from Ricky
I mean,
to Burt Reynolds.
Why would you think Burt Reynolds? Yeah, Burt Reynolds is hanging out there at Camp Arawak. He's coming to check it out. This is bullshit.
I better loan my mustache to that cop.
Oh, God, good Lord. Yeah, but that kid has he doesn't have the voice. Like, he almost does, but he reminds me of the nerd from Simpsons, the same one. Hey, mister! Like, he looks like that kid.
He's like squeaky voice teen right before puberty happened. Like
yes, 100%.
6 months before he turns the squeaky voice teen, yes.
Yep, absolutely.
But he almost has like a weird Anthony Michael Hall look as well.
A little bit, yeah. And that's the kid who gets his head cut off.
Right, and is smiling from ear to ear.
Yep.
After being decapitated. But Adam, we could talk about this movie for a while.
Absolutely. I might watch it when we're done. I might rewatch it again.
I mean, it's very short. It's only about 80 minutes long.
And
it's not a very long movie whatsoever. And it is packed to the gills with fun bits like what we're talking about. But Adam, your final thoughts, if you can sum up at all about Sleepaway Camp.
I mean, like I said, I know it's a very poorly put together movie. It's sleazy. It's all of these things, but that's what makes it charming, and that's what makes it work on so many levels. I think Sleepaway Camp is one of my favorite 80s slasher movies. that aren't tied to like the big franchises. I think it's just perfect. It's so dumb and weird and crazy, but it just works because of that. I love it so much. It reminds me of, like you said, the movies where we think about when, somebody who wasn't born in the States comes over here and wants to make an American movie. That's almost what this feels like. Oh, these summer camp slasher movies are great. Here's what I want to do. And they get the genuine idea down, but it's just they populate with just such weird, crazy decisions. And it works so well.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's definitely one of those movies that, with a lot of the problematic things that aren't just about the ending, it can be a bit squeamish, and I understand some people like maybe not gravitating toward it. But at the same time, the fun stuff, the weird stuff, the bizarre stuff is so worth watching for in this movie. Just the crazy, insane, weird things that, once again, feel like they were made not by an actual human being who knows how humans talk. This feels like it's just made by an alien who came down. It's just like, oh, I know how the humans watch Friday the 13th movies or whatever. And it's so charming in that way. It so has that, like, the earnest ineptitude that makes it so enjoyable from end to end. I totally agree that it's one of my favorites of, like, that kind of, like, rip-off of Friday the 13th class of, like, the early slasher period. And also is kind of weird where it's coming kind of like near the end of like the big slasher boom, where despite we got plenty of slash movies throughout the 80s, but the real boom was like pretty much bookended by Halloween and then Friday the 13th, I would argue, Part 4. Because after that, you get a lot more of just like the also rans, and it gets a lot more like it untethers. This feels like it's kind of like one of the last examples of like the weird Friday the 13th ripoffs that is a lot more fun and isn't just going for the kills. It has fun kills, but it's also just going for just weird random shit that is like so entertaining. In a way that I would say this and Wet Hot American Summer would make a genuinely good double feature.
What a fun night that would be.
Wet Hot is the first movie, and then this is the movie.
You end with this one. Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I again, and I don't want to trample on your final thoughts, but I definitely agree with you. I think this came out near the end of it, but I think Hellraiser was kind of the bookend on those slasher movies, where it's like, okay, now we're doing something completely different. I think this was the end on those summer camp sort of style, and then I think Hellraiser kind of just ended it.
Well, even then, I would argue, like, getting into Hellraiser, like, gets into the more specific supernatural elements, where you get, like, the weird, like, attempts at, like, oh, let's make Friday the 13th supernatural, and do even weirder shit with, like, Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever. I think that kind of ushers in a completely different wave, I think, at that point.
You're so smart. I'm so glad I chose you as the co-host.
Right, that's true. You came up with the show and made sure that it happened every week. But, yeah. But Sleepaway Camp, we recommend it, guys. It's bizarre. Definitely. Yeah. Dive into the weirdness of it, for sure. Yes.
You ain't seen it. You gotta.
Even though, like, we said so much, like, we can't spoil Sleepaway Camp. You have to see it for yourself.
Oh, no, we didn't even scratch the surface, man. We could give you beat for beat the dialogue, but until you hear these people deliver it and see it in the scenario it's being delivered, it means nothing.
But we gotta get to our recurring segment we do every week, Adam. The Double Redo. 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 That works. So the Double Redo is a thing that we do every episode where basically we recommend each a good and steer you away from a bad movie related to the topic. So Adam and I each have a good and a bad one that we're going to talk about for a bit related to summer camp comedies. And I'm starting off here, and the two that I have, one kind of is more in the horror comedy direction, my good pick, but it's one that I love and I think is criminally underseen, is The Final Girls, which is this movie that's about a young woman who is dealing with her mother had died the previous year, and she was a former Scream Queen actress. Her friends decide, like, you know what, hey, let's kind of like, celebrate your mom by going to a midnight screening of her movie, the sort of in the vein of Sleepaway Camp, one of those like Friday the 13th rip-off movies that would have come out in the early 80s. Let's go watch it, let's go celebrate her. And while they're there, they have this big magical circumstance that puts them in the movie. So they like travel magically into the actual movie and start interacting with the characters and whatnot. And that includes, Taissa Farmiga, who plays the main character, interacting with her mom, played by Malin Ackerman. And it's a very funny movie. It's very visually inventive. I think it's one of the more consistent, especially kind of spoofs of the horror genre I've seen in quite a while. It's got a stellar cast with not just, like I mentioned, Taissa Farmiga and Malin Ackerman are so good. You got Aaliyah Shawkat. You've got probably the rare, maybe only time I've really enjoyed Adam Devine in a fucking comedy movie. I think he's pretty stellar in it. There's a lot of really fun, inventive ways they play with they're stuck in the movie and how they kind of work around that. The logic of the movie really makes sense in a lot of ways. And also more importantly, with all the silly jokes and fun elements and genre parody stuff, there's also a real heart to the movie that really surprised me. I watched this originally at South by Southwest when it premiered, and I was stunned watching it, just how emotionally encompassing the big final turns are with that mother-daughter relationship. It works really well. It's a movie that's got the whole package. It's very funny, it's very creative, and it has a lot of heart to it in a way that I hope more people, particularly if you're a big genre fan, I would sincerely recommend checking that movie out. And the bad one I have is one we kind of mentioned earlier. It's the movie that kind of started off the big craze of these movies, Meatballs, which might be a bit controversial, but I saw it recently for the first time, and I don't necessarily hate Meatballs. I just think it's very fascinating as a movie that was a weird cultural touchstone, despite the fact that there's obviously problematic stuff to it that's all throughout. But it also is just kind of very chill and lackadaisical as a comedy. When you watch some of the other things like an Animal House, other movies don't hold up, I at least see where okay, those movies are very bizarre, very over the top, very gag per minute thing in a way where I can see why this was entertaining in the late 70s or whatever. But Meatballs is just kind of this weird chill ride that doesn't have a lot of really funny elements to it, but also not really strong characters aside from Bill Murray, who obviously very early in his career was kind of the movie that put him on the map. After his obviously SNL career, but this was the first big movie of his. Obviously has plenty of funny material in there. He's obviously the key funny person in it, but some of the other people around him are not that interesting, not that engaging, and it has that kind of cheapness that we mentioned earlier about some of these other summer camp comedies. But this one has it to a degree that just feels like it's kind of running thin, even at that's another one that's only about 90 minutes long or so. But it's one of those comedies where even regardless of tasteless jokes that are in there, I just don't think it holds up even as that much of an consistently fun comedy where I see why it was so popular. It feels very much I guess you had to be there kind of thing.
I mean, I agree with both your choices. I've seen both. Final Girls I love, and I cannot agree with you more about Adam Devine. I do not like Adam Devine, but he's really good in this.
By the way, we should emphasize the definite article, because there's also a movie called Final Girls. It's very bad horror movie.
Yeah,
That's a
terrible movie. Yeah,
right.
The Final Girls. Yeah. Very good movie, very sweet. Like you said, the mother-daughter thing is so delicately handled in a weird way of this time travel horror comedy, but it's handled so brilliantly well. But my shout out is, Angela Trimber in this as the sort of the lack of a better term, I think they would call her that, but she's the sex pot sort of camp counselor who all the guys want to get with, and she is so fucking funny.
There's a whole scene that hinges on her trying to
dance,
trying to dance and get be sexually promiscuous in order to lure the killer out.
Yes, it's so fucking funny. Her physical comedic talents are just through the roof. She's so good at this.
Yes.
I absolutely adore her in this. But yeah, everything else in it I really love. I thought it was such a sweet, charming movie. And it is very criminally underseen. But yeah, it works on every level. And Meatballs, it's funny you brought up Animal House in relation, because I completely agree. I think Animal House is very problematic. But I still enjoy Animal House because of how crazy and connected the movie is. It just keeps going. At the end with the parade and their car that they built and all the shit that happens in the movie, where Meatballs is this kind of one note and bland.
Yeah.
It's just sexual joke after sexual joke, and then it's kind of done. I think you're 100% right, where you might have had to be there for that one in the cultural osmosis, because it does not hold up. It is not that funny, and I can do without that one.
Right. I mean, I can see why, if you saw in 1979, just oh my God, Bill Murray, I knew he was on SNL, but he's amazing. Look at him just be so... And then in retrospect, you go back oh, this is Bill Murray at a very B, C, D tier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is still the funniest thing in that movie, because there's not a lot else.
No, yeah, there's basically nothing else. But yeah, I absolutely agree. So for my good pick, I have Ernest Goes to Camp. That it's crazy, a lot of crazy shit, but man, Jim Varney in the first Ernest movie, he's so good. And what a great physical performance. I mean, just the facial structures, and the thing about Ernest, I know this sounds silly, but he was an earnest character. He genuinely cared about the kids. He genuinely cared about the camp. He genuinely wanted to do a good job at everything. And he's just such a funny presence on screen. And then when it gets to the end with the whole contraption they build and all that, and the two cops who are out of their minds, it's a very funny movie to me. It's one of those that I saw as a kid, and I've seen most of the Ernest movies, maybe not all, because there was a lot of direct to video ones that I didn't bother with.
But your favorite is Ernest Goes to Africa, clearly.
Oh yeah, 100%. Very and very delicate with the jokes.
Very tasteful.
Yeah, super tasteful. Much in the vein of like Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. But Ernest Goes to Camp, the first one, still the best one. It's super funny, super charming and cute, and like I said, it's a character you believe actually cares about what he's doing. For the bad, I have one. It's a sequel, big franchise. Not the whole thing takes place in a camp, but a good chunk of it. I have American Pie 2. The reason it's my bad is it takes all the jokes from the first one and just tries to retool them in a way. There's not much new here. And B, the stuff that actually takes place in the camp with the kids is borderline offensive. I mean, it's so close to being like disgusting that it doesn't work for me. Like, granted, there's no necessarily kids involved in a lot of the sort of sexual hijinks, but it's happening right in front of them. It's not good. I mean, I'd argue the first American Pie works for the time it came out, but all of its sequels have sort of faltered and not been as good. And I mean, obviously, and then let's not count the several direct-to-video versions like the Naked Mile and Bandcamp and all that. It's a retread of what we already seen. Like, oh, this worked. It was so funny. It made a lot of money. Nobody expected to. Let's just do it again in a different setting. And it's that classic sort of Hollywood banking on name alone. And it worked for them, made a lot of money. But for me as a viewer, it did not.
More importantly, it allowed Eugene Levy to, just buy so much with how much money he made off that entire series.
Oh,
you know what?
God.
Cash in those checks, Eugene. God bless you.
Yeah, you need eyebrow wax. Go for it.
Of course, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
It's such a huge part of my budget. I need it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have not seen American Pie 2. I've only seen the original and American Reunion, which I watched American Pie like right before Reunion because I hadn't seen it before. And I always say like the original American Pie has like an earnestness to it that makes it a bit more endearing because they feel like actual awkward kids. As opposed to, I've seen so many of like the bad ripoffs of American Pie that just don't even have an inch of that. And I'm assuming American Pie 2, based on what you said, doesn't have that necessarily. And then Ernest Goes to Camp, I know I've seen, it's been so long since I've seen most of those Ernest movies, but I distinctly more remember like the two holiday ones with like Scared Stupid and Christmas, and then Ernest Goes to Jail. But I do have a real affection for like Jim Varney's Ernest, despite the fact that those movies are very dumb, quite frankly, and very like
Super
low
dumb.
budget, have so much like of that weirdness. But Varney is so, like you mentioned, committed to that part and is such a good actor that he makes like this dumb character very charming and, as you mentioned, very earnest. The importance of being Ernest P. Worrell is very clear in this movie. So I would definitely like to rewatch Goes to Camp. It's been a long time. But let's go ahead and just quickly shout out our titles again in case you missed them out there. My good pick was The Final Girls, and my bad pick was Meatballs.
My good pick is Ernest Goes to Camp, and my bad pick is American Pie 2.
And now we're going to get to the end of the show, and we'll be doing our picking for next week's episode at the end of this, so stay tuned for that. But first, we want to thank some people. Like, we want to thank Chris Oliver for the intro and outro music used in our show. Listen to more of his music at chrisoliver.bandcamp.com. Thanks to Christian Thorlally for our artwork. Follow him at Night of Water, that's Night with a K, _of_water, on Twitter and places like that for all his great artwork stuff. And thanks to our supporters on Patreon, patreon.com/DEDBpod, where for just $1 a month, you all get to vote in polls for topics that we do, like, for example, summer camp comedies you all picked, so thank you for that. And of course, you all get to listen to bonus podcasts we put out, like around the time this episode is coming out, before the end of June, we will have put out our latest bonus podcast called Telebilsion, where Adam and I basically recommend a show for the other one to start watching that has had, big success, long running to some degree. And I will be watching for the first time Mindhunter, which I've started as of recent, and Adam will be watching Succession for the first time.
Which I have not started, but I need to because, Brian Cox, one of my favorites.
Oh God, it's the show all the kids are talking about. They're doing the memes about Succession. You gotta be up on those memes.
Yeah, right. That's the main reason to watch it.
Yes, to get all those dank memes. But for more of our own dank memes, follow us at DEDBpod on Twitter and Facebook. And also, you can submit feedback to us either there or at doubleedgedoublebill@gmail.com, all spelled out. And for more of me, find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at NotTheWho'sTommy. I also do some writing at marianithomas.wordpress.com and at film-cred.com.
And you can find me on Instagram at atom_adam. That's ATOM_OR_ADAM. And you can find me in my own personal Facebook at Adam Thomas. It's private, but send me a message, send me a friend request, whatever. Let me know you're a fan of the show. I'll add you. We can shoot the shit about movies. Will always be a good time. And then you can find me on Letterboxd at Schwanson. That's SCHWANDTSON.
And more importantly, you can talk about Jonathan Tiersten pictures all day with him.
I have a wealth of screenshots.
I get them, and they're the highlight of my fucking day every time I see them.
It's the best.
For more of the best stuff, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms. If you're listening on Talk Film Society, you want to listen to all the other great shows on the network. And you can also dig into our archives and our Podbean main feed for all sorts of episodes we did long before we joined Talk Film Society. And everything else, if you can't, support us monetarily on the Patreon, that's cool. Money can be tight. The completely free way to help us out, though, is to rate, review, or simply share the show around, because that gets us more visibility.
And you know what? We appreciate it. A lot of you guys do it, and it's great. I love it, except for you, Rafe. Even when you do it, I still want to punch you in the face.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Are you going to curse him out like Jonathan Tiersten? Just like, you motherfucker
Rafe,
shit.
you motherfucker shit-eating son of a bitch. Fuck you.
Well, now, Adam, it's time we did our picking for next week's episode.
Ruh-roh.
And as we usually do, at the end of every week, Adam and I each have two movies. One of us has two good movies. One of us has two bad movies. We switch up on that quality. And we assign them between 1 and 10 for each of our choices. And the other person picks a number, and they're like, oh, I'm going to pick number 5. And that is closest to one of our two picks. And that gets us our good and our bad feature. Though keep in mind, we have the Godfather rule, where Adam and I each have a veto in our back pockets, just one single veto we have to use at some point between now and next May. When we get another veto for the year, we have to use it or lose it for this one. So if we hear, oh, hey, let's end up getting close to this good pick, the one person has the option to say, you know what, I don't want to cover that movie. Actually, I'll take the cannoli. And thus we have to go with whatever other choice is there. And next week, our topic is about an actress we've been wanting to do an episode on for a bit. We really like her work, and she's, getting back into the superhero stuff with Thor, Love and Thunder. We have Natalie Portman, who I am shocked came back to the Marvel Universe. Because based on, especially like the Thor, the Dark World, she seemed like, I'm fucking done. I'm very shocked she came back.
That Marvel money, baby. She's got kids now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's... And she gets to work with Taika Waititi. He's like the guy now. So right. I get it.
Yes, of course. But, Adam, I have the two good picks. You have the two bad picks. So for my two good picks, please pick a number between 1 and 10.
Oh, fuck. All right. I'm going to go number 6.
Okay. That's closest to number 7. And number 7, I have a very interesting movie that she did that feels a bit outside of her wheelhouse, but I'm really glad that she did. It's a sort of interesting genre picture. I have Alex Garland's Annihilation.
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah, I'm not taking the cannoli on that. I think that's a solid fucking movie. I've only seen it once. I cannot wait to revisit it.
Well, on the other side of things, I have a movie that I think, it was a bit divisive when it came out, even though it got a lot of Oscar play for her. But I think it's a very good movie that kind of got lost in the Oscar shuffle. I have her Oscar-nominated turn in Jackie over number 2.
Never seen it. Not a biopic guy. That's why I never bothered.
It's a lot less of a biopic, and it's more of just like a deep meditation on a woman who has lost so much. It's a very fascinating movie.
All right. Okay. All right.
But for your 2 bad choices, Adam, I guess I'll go a bit on the opposite side of things. I'll go with number 4.
Okay. At number 3, I have a movie that it's title enough. It lets you know that it's not going to be good. I have Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium.
I honestly did not expect this. Huh. I mean, I haven't seen Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. I guess I won't take the cannoli on that. Whatever. Let's see how that goes. Sure. I'll do that.
All right. Damn it.
What was your other choice?
Number 10, I had a movie that came out, I believe, 2 years ago that came out and then died a very quick death that I haven't seen but looked weird. I have Vox Lux.
That one I've heard very divisive things about. I've heard very love it or hate it kind of things. I would have been fascinated to see that, but okay. We'll go with Mr. Gorham's Wonder Emporium.
You didn't pick it? Yeah, you fucked around.
That's true. I didn't do the cannoli, but let's see the double feature of Annihilation and Mr. McGorham's Wonder Emporium.
Good lord.
We'll get to that next time, everybody. But until then, eat shit and live.
Yeah. Yeah.